Every athlete leaves something behind. Not just records, but moments that changed the way the game felt. Some stories are loud. This one isn't. Tonight, we slow it all down. And listen. This is Whispers of the Game. The quiet rise of Justin Jefferson, cinematic NFL storytelling. The air in Louisiana hangs thick like syrup as the dusk settles over the rooftops of St. Rose. Crickets chirp in rhythm with the hum of far-off highway lights. A breeze brushes against a torn screen door. Soft yellow light spills from a kitchen window. Inside, laughter, barely heard, fades into the night. And on the edge of a cracked driveway, beneath the glow of a street lamp buzzing tiredly, a boy sits. Quiet, still, not sad, not dreaming, just listening, because some beginnings don't need bang or breathlessness. Some legends are born in the hush between dinner and bedtime, in the silent sonar of the heart. His name was Justin, but then, it wasn't important. Not yet. He was the third, the one not in the spotlight, the one setting out folding chairs, collecting stray footballs in the dark. They all rushed ahead, older brothers with strong steps and louder names. He followed without sound, learning more from echoes than from answers. No one asked him to shine. No one told him to become. But on that porch, there was a flicker, like a star starting to protest the night. Before cleats, before college, before the NFL and the gritty and signature gloves, before all of that. He was just a boy, waiting for the world to turn. Waiting for permission, or perhaps, waiting to stop needing it. They say the loudest moments in life are fireworks, crowds, cheers, scoreboards. But there's power, too, in what's quiet. A look, a breath, a word never said. And if you listen closely, truly, closely, you can hear what was happening on that still Louisiana night. Not a roar, not a flash, just stirrings. A whisper rising from skin to sky. Something like, soon. Something like, watch. Because every legend, before they are seen, are heard first by the silence. And in that silence, he moved. Not quickly, not for anyone, but the world had already started leaning in. The rain in St. Rose doesn't slam. It taps, soft against the tin roof. Polite, persistent, like it's asking permission to stay a while. Inside the Jefferson house, the light glows warm, not grand, not loud, just enough to feel held. Smells of red beans and rice drift through the rooms, wrapped in the echo of a mother's quiet humming, a father's voice low with care, and footsteps. Always. Not one, but three. Justin watched it all. He was small, but not in presence, just in volume. Hands too big for his wrists. Eyes that looked past the moment. No one asked him to lead. No one asked him to follow. He just was. Present, absorbing, studying the way love moved in cracked linoleum corners and backyard chalk lines. He sat on the porch sometimes after dinner, not waiting for anything, just watching water slide off gutters, tracking trails left by raindrops across worn concrete. Football? It was always close, coils of it in every drawer, tangled in shoelaces and dinner conversations. His father, John, didn't shout the game. He offered it, like a story passed hand to hand. Plays drawn on napkins. Practices run between the hedges of the yard. No whistles. No pressure. Just truth in repetition. Love in the lesson. Justin's brothers, Shamar and Jordan, they ran the show. Pads. Helmets. Practices that felt like Sundays. He would carry their water. Their cleats. Their dreams, and with every yard they gained, he measured a quiet promise, not to be them, but to learn every inch of their path. At school, he barely spoke unless he had to. Not shy, just saving his energy for something else. Something not yet named. He remembered the sound of cleats on tile, of shoulder pads dropped on laundry room floors, the echo of brothers talking about catches, drops, plays. And he remembered nodding, even when he didn't understand, just so he could stay close to where the fire was. Faith was planted in him slowly. Not by preachers, but by parents who listened before they spoke. By routine, by quiet pride. And under that roof, the rain kept coming. Years passed in it. Growth happened beneath it. Not loud, not meteoric, but as sure as roots drinking quietly from the earth. In photos from those days, he's often off-center, a shoulder, a smile halfway in frame. But his eyes always caught the whole picture. He wasn't invisible. He was observing, charting maps behind someone else's footsteps. In this world, some are built with force, others with stillness. He was the second kind. And even then, shoes muddy at the door, jerseys drying on bushes, geometry book on the couch beside a wrinkled Nerf ball. Even then, something was taking shape. Not forged, not forced, just formed. A rhythm in the rain. A glance across the kitchen table. A boy absorbing every silent sermon love could preach. He didn't ask for more. He just waited, watching the roots grow in the soft ground beneath his name. The bleachers were hard, the kind that left lines on your skin and impressions in your memory. Friday nights felt larger than the town. Stadium lights buzzed like insects drunk on attention. And below them, boys flew. Not just played, flew. Justin sat near the edge, feet swinging, eyes still. On the field, Shamar cut across defenders like river water around stones. Jordan danced down sidelines, each step a stanza in a poem only the field could read. They weren't just good, they were gospel. And Justin? He was choir, invisible, but listening. He clapped when they scored, nodded when they stumbled, caught their helmets when they returned to the bench. Always there, just behind, just beneath. His world wasn't made of whistles and highlights yet. It was built from glances. From the way a coach handed Shamar the call sheet. From how Jordan adjusted his gloves twice before every snap. He learned cadence from footsteps. Learned courage from watching the unspoken moments. Like when they lost but still held their heads level. Nobody needed to draw him a play. He memorized them without ink. Watched angles form like origami across green, and tucked each fold into his quiet chest. At home, the game kept playing. It followed his brothers inside. Into dinner talk. Into video sessions whispered over cereal. Into dreams recycled between brothers who shared more than a surname. Justin rarely corrected them. He didn't need to. He was building his library while they lent him page after page. Sometimes he'd take a ball after dark, when the house fell into bedtime, and replay their routes using porch light as his spotlight. Not fast, not fancy, but step by step, he mimicked the way greatness bent its knees. Shifted weight, turned nothing into open space. He didn't want to be them. He wanted to understand the world they touched. To learn the weight of the crown without needing it on his head just yet. In school hallways, his last name meant something, but not him. Not really. He was the little one. The afterthought to stars already risen. But that was fine, because in the shade of their wings, he learned to stretch his own, quietly. Carefully, faithfully, not yet ready to fly. But eager, not jealous, grateful. Some learned through applause, others through silence. And Justin understood that shadows weren't meant to bury. They were meant to shape. He was gathering light the way one gathers rain, cup by cup, never rushing, always thirsty. And in time, he would pour it out. With hands that caught dreams. With feet that remembered every echo. With a heart fluent in the quiet power of watching first, so you can one day move the world. The locker room smelled like grass and hope. Old cleats thudded against concrete, and dreams spilled between chipped lockers and walls lined with motivational quotes yellowed by years. Destrehan High was known, not legendary, but proud. The kind of school where football meant Friday night lights and a whole town watching. Justin walked those halls like a whisper inside a storm, unnoticed by most, but never not noticing. He wore the jersey, number low, name stitched right, but the weight it held was quiet. He didn't start, barely played. At 5'7" and barely 125, he looked more like a water boy than a receiver in waiting. Coaches nodded politely, encouraged him, but in that way that feels more like goodbye than belief. They'll grow, they said. Maybe next camp, just needs time, but time does strange things to hearts that beat too loud for their chests. In practice, he ran every drill the way others waited. Crisp, quick, painfully precise, like someone trying to prove he belonged in a world that hadn't saved him a seat. He lined up across teammates who barely blinked in his direction. Yet every cut, every break, every out route to the sideline, was a quiet declaration. I see me, and one day, you will too. But attention didn't come, not then, not fast. Recruiters walked past. Clipboards closed before his reps even started. No whispers followed him off the field. Just silence. Still. And in that stillness, something solidified. Not anger. Not pity. Just resolve pressed into the spine like chalk lines etched deep into dirt. He went home after games with barely sweated jerseys. Hung them with care. Woke up before the sun. Ran routes in dew. Lifted with ghosts. Chased shadows of brothers who once made these lights flicker. One offer came, late, barely more than courtesy. LSU, maybe because of family, maybe luck, maybe mercy. But no matter the reason, the address didn't change the plan. He said yes, but inside, he whispered louder. This is the beginning. They didn't see the fire. Just smoke, but that was fine. Because sometimes, smoke is just the breath of something holy waiting to catch. And he was ready to burn. The weight room didn't echo. It thudded, metal to metal, dreams compressed into barbell reps and whispered breath. LSU was a cathedral of noise. Marching bands, generations of legends, Saturdays that swallowed towns whole. But Justin moved through it, like a ghost in cleats. Unknown, red-shirted, waiting. They gave him a number, a locker, a schedule. But not a role. Freshman year meant quiet, not by design, but by default. Games passed. He suited up, warmed up, sat down. The stadium roared. He listened, not jealous, just cataloging the pulse of a place he hadn't broken into yet. In meetings, he took notes too detailed. Routes memorized like verses. Coverages colored with mental ink. In practice, he never jogged. Never coasted. Each drill a secret audition. Each representative a plea painted quiet in sweat. The others laughed, chattered between sets, had names that carried weight. Justin? He clocked in. Early. Alone. Repeated footwork until repetition became religion. He wasn't angry. Just unfinished. And in the silence of sideline weeks, he built himself, inch by inch, muscle by muscle, belief by belief. He watched film like it was prophecy. Paused, rewound, drew invisible lines in the air mimicking breaks he hadn't earned yet. The locker room didn't know him, but the field did. Grass gave under his steps like it recognized him. Dust curved around his feet like it remembered who he was becoming. Some days, he caught passes from backup quarterbacks long after the lights dimmed. Cold hands, sweat-slick gloves, no cameras. The lights stayed on in his head though, a reel spinning with visions no one else rented. He went home for holidays with no plays to brag on, no highlights to replay. Family asked, "Are you playing yet?" He smiled, said, "Not yet," left off the ache. The waiting room echo inside his ribs. But behind his eyes, a fire leaned forward. He wasn't chasing a job. He was building a body holy enough to hold what was coming. Not fame, not flash, readiness. Each bench press, each root tree traced in air, each mile run under moonlight, was a quiet offering to the game he wasn't done proving himself to yet. Because Justin knew, growth isn't always seen. It's felt, not in spotlights, but in soreness, not in applause, but in the still weight of waiting. And while no one watched, he bloomed anyway. Some stories don't begin with lightning. They begin with a nod, a handshake in passing, a ball spun in silence beneath a gray Louisiana sky. Joe Burrow arrived like a page already half-written. Older, different, unfamiliar. But something about him, measured, unbothered, like he, too, came from quiet corners, made space. They weren't fast friends. No fireworks. Just a spiral passed between shadows, late after practice. Trust wasn't declared. It was built, one representative at a time. Justin ran the routes like hymns. Joe threw with rhythm, not rush. They met in the middle, not by coincidence, but by compounding belief. 2018 cracked a door. For the first time, his cleats dug into starting turf without apology. He didn't pop off the page. Not yet, but efficiency wore his jersey. Slants sealed neatly at the top. Comebacks turned corners like he danced with geometry. He didn't shout. He flowed. DBs flinched when he hadn't moved. Coaches began double-taking. Teammates noticed hands that never betrayed the ball. He wasn't chasing attention, just executing truth. 1,000 yards. A blink. A whisper of what was waiting. He became the kind of reliable that quarterbacks dream about, not for the flash, but for the certainty. On 3rd and long, he didn't just run to the marker. He became the marker. There was no gritty yet. No national spotlight. Just a boy-turned-man who knew what it felt like to be unseen and now caught everything like he was catching the world's second chance. Even the scoreboard couldn't quite keep up. He wasn't being discovered, he was being revealed, and inside that slow unfurling was the quiet chemistry between two late bloomers. Burrow didn't look for headlines. Jefferson didn't play for praise. But together, they sculpted something firm out of expectation's dust. People started to ask, where'd he come from? And the answer was simple, from where silence turns into skill. From reps no one praised. From throws after hours. From locker room namelessness to game plans etched around number 2. He wasn't a secret anymore. But he wasn't a star yet, either. Not in the way stars are loud. He was a signal, a shape taking form, and those who had watched closely could already feel it. Something had shifted. The spark was no longer waiting. It had taken root and started to spread. Autumn leaned heavy on Baton Rouge. Gold leaves, restless air, and a stadium that did more than echo. It roared like memory, like time itself had picked up a football and demanded you watch. 2019 did not arrive. It descended, with Joe at the helm, and Jamar streaking down sidelines like sirens. A machine began to hum. But machines are cold. This felt like music. And Justin? He was the rhythm beneath it all. The thread sewn through chaos, clean in motion, precise in space. They didn't run plays. They performed them. A route wasn't an assignment, it was choreography. And he was balance incarnate. While defenders lunged, he leaned. While safeties guessed, he glided past the answer. Practice bled into perfection, games blurred into galleries. Each route woven like silk against defenders still tying their shoes. Jamar exploded, fiery, raw, undeniable. Justin countered, slick, smooth, subtler than breath. Yin and yang in shoulder pads and finesse. 4 touchdowns. 1 half. Oklahoma never saw it coming. He smiled after the first. Nodded after the second. Shrugged by the third. Laughed by the fourth. Not because it wasn't sacred. But because it felt right. He wasn't trying to embarrass. Only to express the quiet years that had waited to be let out. Unchained in the rhythm of release. Commentators scrambled for comparisons. Coaches flipped clipboards. Fans stared at the scoreboard like it was lying. He just jogged back to the huddle like the wind had whispered it would happen. Because it had. See, routes were never random to him. Each step, timed, each fake, baked in watched film and the muscle memory of midnight reps. It wasn't luck. It wasn't fate. It was poetry etched one snap at a time. He didn't demand throws. He earned glances. He didn't wave his arms. He made himself open by disappearing at the right moment. Defenders reached for him like reaching for smoke. Brief contact, then air. And the crowd, they didn't know whether to cheer or to breathe. Because what they were seeing wasn't a performance. It was a blooming. LSU tore through the season with fire and finesse, but beneath the flame was something softer. Justin's silent artistry, unfolding route by route. For the first time, he wasn't proving. He was being. No more shadows. No more sidelines. Just open fields and the sound of the game finally singing in his key. He didn't roar. He resonated. And on Saturdays, as stadiums rose to their feet without knowing exactly why, he moved. Gracefully. Deliberately. Like he had always been part of the game long before anyone knew his name. The confetti didn't fall like celebration. It drifted, slow, like snow that had decided to shine just this once. LSU stood in smoke and glory. Chests heaving, faces lit, voices cracked from joy. And Justin? He stood there still, helmet off, eyes not at the crowd, but at the sky. Not searching, more like remembering something. Because this wasn't surprise. This was fulfillment. Of whispered dreams. Of silent reps. Of that porch in St. Rose where rain danced and futures stirred. National champion. Perfect season. Records folded into history books still warm from the ink. His teammates whooped, grabbed Gatorade buckets, posed for reporters. He shook hands, hugged, smiled, but deep in his chest was something still. Not absence, just peace. The mission had never been about noise. It was movement, precision, forms folded inside purpose. The NFL began to buzz. Mock drafts listed him, sometimes high, sometimes as an afterthought. But unlike years before, he didn't flinch. He knew who he'd been long before anyone else caught on. He fielded questions with poise. Spoke gently. Let others roar. He wasn't trying to impress anymore. He was trying to stay grateful. Because when you've once been unseen, truly unseen, and now the world turns its spotlight on you, a part of you still sees the shadows. Not with fear, but with memory. The goals had shifted. Less about stats, more about longevity. More about joy, more about flow. He made time for family. For teammates. For himself. He watched films still, not out of duty, but devotion. The silence was no longer his cage. It was his home, his rhythm, his advantage. And in that post-championship calm, he started thinking forward. Not of contracts or schedules, but of presence. How to remain soft in a world that hardens you the moment you're known. He didn't crave the crown. He craved the craft. Because long before anyone knew the name, Justin Jefferson, the boy in the backyard, had already chosen the path. Not by noise, not by applause, but through the quiet art of catching what the world hadn't seen yet. And turning it into something that could never be ignored again. April held its breath, not spring, but something quieter. Stillness soaked into living rooms where couches became arenas, and families leaned forward with hands clasped like their hopes could move the clock. It wasn't the draft anyone imagined. No handshakes on stages, no golden blazers or suit-lined backdrops. Just screens, living rooms, static on televisions and hearts beating behind closed doors. In the Jefferson home, a bowl of chips halfway touched, a grandmother's prayer in the air, and brothers stretching their legs like they could calm the nerves by pacing them out. Justin sat near the middle, not postured, but present. Phone in hand, laughter slipping through the worry on occasion. But beneath every smile was a waiting no one could see. He wasn't afraid. He was ready. But waiting, that he knew well. That he had practiced. Pick after pick. Names read like novel chapters he wasn't in yet. Teams passed. Some without glance. Some maybe with intention to circle back. Still, the couch held him. Still, he waited. 21 came. Gone. The moment was folding in. Then, his phone lit like a promise. Minnesota. Warmth in a cold city, if you looked right. He didn't shout. Didn't jump. He leaned forward, listening for the voice that made it real. Yes. He heard it. Welcome to the Vikings. And then, the room broke into chorus. Arms thrown around necks. Celebration spoken in smiles wider than fear. His mother's eyes held tears that carried birth to this hour. His father, proud, quiet, like a coach who knew the play would work, just needed the clock to agree. He whispered something in the mix. Not for the cameras. Not for the quotes. Just for this house. This family that had walked every unseen mile with him. Reporters talked about fit, about scheme, about need, but none of them knew the journey this couch had cradled. The nights replayed, the reps carved from nothing but will. And now, the world offered a stage not as reward, but as invitation. Minnesota. Snow. New systems. Fresh air. Less noise. More room to work. The cameras showed a smile. But underneath that frame, something ancient had stirred. A fire lit long ago was seen by millions for the first time. But for Justin, the moment wasn't arrival. It was acknowledgement, a nod from the universe. We see you now. And from that small room of peeling photos and second-hand sofas, he didn't step out to take over. He stepped forward to keep building. What he already knew was holy. Not fame, not legacy, just the chance to catch what came next. Minnesota air doesn't greet, it tests. Breath turns to frost before your sentence finishes. Skies hang gray, as if still deciding what kind of winter to be. But Justin didn't flinch, didn't grumble. He zipped his jacket, tucked gloves into pockets, and walked out like he'd always belonged in a place that asked you to prove yourself. No fanfare, no giant billboard, just a practice field and silence. Exactly his language. He studied the playbook like it had been written in a dialect he already spoke. Footnotes echoed from Baton Rouge, but the pages here were colder, critical, unforgiving, and faster. Receiver's room full of veterans. Eyes measuring, coaches watching but not yet believing. He smiled when spoken to. Nodded when corrected, but mostly, he listened. It was quiet work, the kind that doesn't make clips. Just confidence layered slowly. Practice reps turned sharper. Roots grabbed the air like they meant to stay. Eyes began to linger after his cuts. Whispers started walking through meetings. Watch 83. He's smooth. Something there. First 2 games, silent box scores. Learning, not leaping. Still behind. Still waiting. Then, week 3. Titans. The play wasn't legendary. Just a slant route. Catch. Yak. Then another. And another. Then the fade. Ball hung skyward like it was testing gravity. He rose, not with struggle, but with certainty. Brought it down. 2 feet. 6 points. Gritty. He didn't invent the dance, but in that moment, it felt like breath finally exhaled from a chest that had carried too much waiting. The announcers double-checked names. The analysts rewound film. The league blinked. Who is this? But he'd been here the whole time. Just waiting for the sky to look down and notice. He finished with 175 yards that day. Not a star born, just revealed. The city didn't erupt. It tilted. Fans leaned in closer. Not because of swagger, but because of stillness. He wasn't loud. He wasn't brash. He moved like someone who had already dreamed this. 1,000 times beneath a porch light no one cared to stare at. And now, the snow didn't feel so sharp. It felt earned. The playbook? It pulsed in his hands. He wasn't a feature yet. Wasn't a headline. But something had changed. A current in the way defenders hesitated. A shift in how quarterbacks squinted pre-snap looking for something soft and certain. Not every arrival is thunder. Some come wearing silence and leave with the game leaning toward them. Like trees toward sunlight. The crowd didn't know his name like it knew others. Not yet, but the field did, and by week 3, the grass had started whispering it. Every step he took was poetry disguised as blueprint. Precise, measured, as if the yard markers bowed under his feet. 7 steps, then the break. Defender still chasing ghosts of the first 3. Ball in the air. Hands rise, not desperately, but as if the spiral belonged there. Always had. Catch. Turn. And then, movement. The kind you don't teach. The kind launched from rhythm, not muscle. He moves toward the end zone and the cameras tilt up chasing someone who still doesn't speak loudly unless spoken to by the game. And in response, he dances. The gritty, light, playful, unapologetic. It wasn't a celebration. It was a release. Of years. Of yards never given. Of weight finally lifted. It looked like fun. It was. But it was also defiance baked into freedom. A smile across history's silent notes. Commentators scrambled again. Who is he? Where did he come from? But those who'd listened before already knew. He was the whisper in plain sight. The late bloomer who never needed flash. He just needed a lane and a little belief from the ball. Stats piled, not loudly, like snow, accumulating softly, quiet inches becoming records. He passed names, benchmarked legends, not with fanfare, but footwork. Week after week, 5 catches for 80, then 7 for 100. Then more. But the part they missed was what didn't show up on screen. The breaks that loosened corners' knees, the fakes that rewound time, the trust he seeded in his quarterback's eyes snap after snap. He didn't raise his arms pre-play. Didn't stomp or bark. He lined up like faith with cleats. And every time the ball spun toward him, it found stillness in his palms like it too had been waiting for someone who took the game as sacred. The gritty caught on. Kids danced on sidewalks, in locker rooms, in living rooms. They weren't copying a pro. They were echoing joy. Joy that came from precision. Timing. Work in shadows. Jefferson didn't chase fame. Fame changed its path for him. Tiptoed toward someone who never asked it to look his way. And yet, here he was. First year. First roar. Not the loudest. Not the flashiest, but the one with the softest steps and the most certain moves. And slowly, the league leaned in. Because what they were hearing wasn't noise. It was a player making whispers sound like thunder. Every catch carried weight, not just of the game, but of memory. Of coaches who glanced past him. Of scouts who shrugged. Of clipboards that closed too soon. Each yard gained was a sentence written in a letter he'd been drafting since the bleachers of Destrehan. They'd said, too small. Too thin. Not strong enough. Needs more burst. And now he burst with purpose, not for revenge, but remembrance. Rookie season rolled forward like a storm wearing church shoes. Quiet until it wasn't. Bang, a new first down. Flash, a corner biting too early. Jump, a ball plucked midair like fruit he always knew would ripen. But it wasn't the stats that fed him most. It was the erasure of old lines, the soft recalibration of what was possible. They kept talking, the pundits, changing their tone, some acting like he'd always been in their conversation. But he remembered silence. He remembered watching highlight reels he was never a part of. Remembered locker rooms where his name was taped on loosely. As if removable. Now, the league tried to recite his name like it had always known how. Jefferson. 2 syllables carrying unsaid apologies from all those who never said his first one right. He kept his answers short. Yes ma'ams. Thank yous. Appreciate it's. Because that's how he'd been raised. Confidence in motion, never in volume. Rookie records tumbled. Randy's name came up. Then he passed it, didn't scream, just blinked like it was morning and the light had finally entered the room. Kids started counting his steps, copying the way he leaned into corners, studying the stutter of his release like scripture. And he let them, not because he wanted fans, because he understood what it felt like to need a map. His greatness didn't arrive like a comet through stadium glass. It unfolded like a letter finally opened after years of being stamped, not ready. He laughed sometimes, at interviews that dug for angst. Tell us what you proved. He only smiled, because it was never about proving. It was about being ready when your number's buried on a depth chart. Being consistent when the lights are only half on. Being present when no one claps for your roots. Some play to be heard. He played like someone writing a thank you note to every voice that called him less. Not bitter, better, not louder, clearer. Every finger roll over the goal line was punctuation. Each gritty a lowercase celebration of uppercase belief. He wasn't fueled by disrespect. He was fueled by memory. Memories of being last picked, last noticed, never asked to dance, but now setting the rhythm. They called it breakout. He called it arrival. Quiet, faithful, earned. And beneath his helmet, he still heard it. Not the crowd, but the echo. You're not enough. He smiled, took another step, caught another pass. Every catch, another page. And the letter kept writing itself. They weren't chasing him. He was chasing them. Jerry, Randy. Not footsteps to follow, but shadows on the hill he was running up daily. They'd written the blueprint. He studied it, not just with highlights but with hunger. An appetite not for replication, but revelation. Could greatness be quiet and still raise statues? Could joy live inside pressure's house without cracking? Year 2 didn't ask. It demanded. Defenses watched film now. Doubled him. Tapped helmets before the snap just to mark his name with underlined urgency. Still, he moved, unchanged by the noise, untouched by the crowd. Like a violin at full sprint, every cut a note. He wasn't sprinting, he was composing. You don't lead the league in elegance, but you can dominate in its disguise. He attacked roots with holy patience. And when the ball left the quarterback's hand, he had already painted the ending. Slants so sharp they rewrote geometry. Corner fades as precise as clock hands in prayer. And yet, he smiled through it, each yard a quiet thank you to the boy who never got called first. They stacked mirrors in front of him, triple coverage, bracket, press. He stepped through them, like he'd read the book already. But it wasn't just moves. It was meaning. The numbers appeared, stacked in silence. 1,400, 1,600, asterisks formed in real time, comps piled on like snow, closest to this. Most since that, but all he wanted was to chase ghosts until they turned and nodded. Legacy weighed more now, but he carried it, like he'd trained for this lift his whole life. Because he had, every morning route without witness, every drop that didn't make the highlights. Every time he got up and ran it again anyway. This wasn't sudden. This was earned. Reporters asked about pressure. He answered with art. One toe tap on the sideline, poetry. A dig route between safeties, symphony. A post-corner double move that left defenders debating their choices, classic. This wasn't just football. It was gallery work. A canvas of motion where every line broke history a little more open. And still, he kept it simple. Step by step, yard by yard. No crown needed to prove he'd arrived. He didn't pretend to be them. Rice, Moss. He honored them by making room on the shelf. Not a replica, a ripple. From the roots of Louisiana to the frozen fields of Minnesota, a whisper rising that would echo for years. Sundays slowed down, not in the world, in him. The huddle buzzed with breath and nerves, but inside his chest, stillness. Not numb, aware. The ball felt lighter now. Or maybe his hands just remembered how long they'd waited to hold it. Layers of the game peeled back, What once was fast became frame by frame. DB's hips twitched. Tell. Safety shaded left. Tell. Linebacker squinted. Tell. He didn't react. He read. Time, once a rushing tide, now sat beside him. 3rd and 7? His pulse didn't spike. It stilled. He knew where the soft spot was, like it whispered his name before the snap even rose. Routes became language, not words, notes. Music between defenders' steps. While others strained to sprint, he floated. The difference wasn't just physical. It was internal. He didn't chase the moment. He dwelled in it, let it stretch, breathe, bend around him. Underneath the turf, beneath each cleat-marked yard, was a knowing. Silent, sacred, eyes locked mid-route with quarterbacks who threw not to open space, but to memory, because he'd been there so many times in practice, you could clock it. Without a watch, on the sideline, helmet off, he sat like a monk in shoulder pads. Watching, always watching, not critiquing, decoding. Where others complained about scheme, he adjusted. Where some shouted into headsets, he whispered to his feet. One more inch, one more angle, one more way to disappear and then reappear. Right where the chains stop. The game used to shout. Now it sang. And the same grace that once guided him in shadows now danced through zone coverage like it belonged there. He wasn't trying to outrun anybody. He was trying to become invisible until it was too late. Catch, step, cut, pause, gone. Defenders barked. Coaches praised. Fans roared. Justin just smiled like all of this had already happened in some dream he'd memorized and now finally just got to live. Because when the game speaks, not everyone hears it. But he did. Not as noise. As invitation. Every Sunday, the field unfurled like a canvas. And he, brush in hand, stride soft as prayer, painted the silence full. There are catches, and then there are moments that bend reality. Buffalo. 4th and 18. Late, loud, everything on the edge of collapse. The huddle didn't scream. It exhaled. No panic. Just the weight of needing a miracle and finding no diagram that could promise one. He lined up wide, but not wide-eyed. Looked once at the sky. Clouds gathering like breath before the roar. Snap. He moved. Not fast. Not frantic. Measured. Like the grass was giving him coordinates. Defender blanketed his hip, elbow tight to rib. Ball already on its way. Too high, too far, too late. He leapt. Both hands up. So did the corner. 4 hands above 33 yards of expectation. Only one came down with it. Not a bobble. Not a struggle. Palms, steady. Fingers, faithful. He twisted mid-air, spine bending in prayer. Feet touched down like the ground had been waiting. Like fate had cleared a spot in green for that exact landing. Crowd didn't cheer at first. They gasped. Even time paused, recoiling from disbelief, wondering how quiet hands just rewrote the 4th quarter. Teammates ran, mouths open, arms wide. Some didn't know what to say, so they screamed. He didn't. He stood, ball in hand, like this had always been part of the plan. Not arrogance, assurance. Moments like this? They don't teach them. They don't diagram them. They come from porches, nighttime routes, footsteps traced in lonely fields. This was every, not yet, turned finally into, now. Cameras spun in circles. Analysts stuttered. Old names stirred in record books like ghosts sneaking a peek at the new chapter. But for Justin, it wasn't magic. It was memory, arriving right on time. A catch doesn't stop the world. But sometimes, it slows it. Just enough for one man to remind the sky itself that gravity has exceptions. Greatness never arrives quietly, but it demands silence after. Not the silence of emptiness, the silence of weight. Endorsements came, commercials, interviews he used to watch with other faces in them. Now his. The world, once distant and disinterested, leaned too close. Brand deals called his phone like friends he didn't know he had. His name lit up places he'd never been. Billboards, buses, apps that did nothing but count his moves. He smiled, grateful, but stretches lasted longer. Sleep came slower. And joy, once a given, now needed guarding. It wasn't fame he feared, it was fracture. Because he knew how dreams distort when retold by strangers. How the quiet gets lost when the volume never dims. In locker rooms, new voices rose. Cameras hovered like insects. Questions came dressed like compliments. And every answer grew heavier. Are you the best? Can you repeat it? Can greatness last when feet grow tired and hearts grow loud? The gritty spread wider than he ever danced it. But behind the smiles, he kept asking the realest question. Can I still hear the game beneath the noise? So he adjusted, simplified, less scrolling, more footwork, back to early reps, back to playlists only he listened to. The world could cheer all it wanted, but he still needed to run routes like prayers. Intentional, sacred, not needing proof. He stopped chasing stats, chased precision instead, stopped counting defenders, started counting steps. When teammates slumped, he lifted. Not loudly, with a glance, a tap, a truth few could hear but felt. He didn't fight the fame. He just refused to let it feed him. Because spotlight burns when you trade hunger for applause. So he stayed hungry. Not for more, for meaning. It wasn't about being better than yesterday. It was about remembering who ran before him so he wouldn't fumble himself now. He wasn't playing the game anymore. He was protecting it, making sure love didn't dissolve into expectation. Making sure his smile still outran his stat line. Some call it pressure. He called it privilege. To be named, to be watched, but still, to return each week and play like no one was watching. Not easy, just essential, because being great is loud. But staying great, staying kind through it, that's quiet work, invisible in box scores, etched in legacy. And Justin? He kept showing up, not for fame, not for followers, but for the boy who once waited on a cracked driveway and only needed a ball and a little room to move. Records didn't blink when they fell. They broke the same way he arrived, soundless, steadily, like water drawing its line along stone. Each game added something, a toe touch here, a back shoulder there, hands, always sure, gathering history like it was meant to be held. At some point, his name started leading broadcasts. At some point, his jersey became a symbol. But he never chased it. Never woke up measuring himself in applause. He still laced his cleats the same way. Still taped his wrists with purpose only he needed to read. Franchise leader. They said it now with reverence. But to him, the only thing being led was himself. Back to center, back to the field, back to joy. Because the question had changed. From, can you make it? To, what will you leave behind? Silence asked him that at night. Not in fear, in focus. What is legacy? Is it numbers? Trophies? Or is it the way a little kid in a cracked backyard leans into a root and says your name without needing to know your stats? He wanted both. To be brilliant and beloved. To shine bright and still offer warmth. So he began shaping something larger. A voice, a presence, a lane for others to follow without ever needing to speak loud. Teammates came with questions, he answered in movement. Rookies watched in silence, he gave them grace in his glance. He didn't build a shrine. He left breadcrumbs, so someone else could take this trail and run. It wasn't about being number one. It was about being the kind of number that didn't need a comparison. He smiled more, laughed broader, played freer, not softer, truer. Because when you've climbed the mountain, the air changes. What you see shifts. And what matters is not what's in your hands, but what your hands can lift. He still practiced like he was trying to earn it. Still ran drills like someone forgot to believe in him. But the drive had changed flavors. No longer to be heard. To be felt. Even his gritty landed different now. Not playful, but peaceful. A small thank you from the top of a road carved in rain, shadow, and quiet faith. Legacy isn't loud, it lingers. And Justin? He was just beginning to listen for the echo. Kids didn't see stats, they saw smiles. When Justin stepped onto a high school field for a camp, a visit, anything. The air changed, not because a star arrived. Because someone familiar did. Shoes scuffed from gravel lots. Socks pushed low, shirt a size too big. He looked like them, moved like magic, and when he danced, the gritty still light on his feet. Every kid laughed like possibility had just winked at them. It wasn't rehearsed, wasn't staged. He signed shoes, not just cleats. Jordans, slides, dollar store sneakers. Each one laced with hope. He ran as hard in a charity flag game as on a Sunday. Because it wasn't the scoreboard that made him sprint. It was the chance to make a kid's memory last longer than their weekend. He listened, really listened, to hometown stories, to dreams still unspoken, to a boy who couldn't afford a jersey but drew number 18 on notebook pages until the pencil snapped. Justin saw him, because he had been him. Backpacks filled with gear, school visits, donations wrapped in humility. No press releases, just presence. He didn't wave a flag. He handed one off, let someone else carry it a little ways. Just long enough to believe it was theirs. Because being seen never left him. Being overlooked never did either. He laughed with moms who whispered, "Thank you," while swallowing tears because their sons now had someone to point at and say, "Maybe." He never wore the crown like gold. He wore it like borrowed light. And he gave it back, piece by piece, with every handshake, every shout out, every time he looked a kid in the eyes and said, "You got something." Some athletes give autographs. He gave permission to dance, to believe, to rise. Off the field, he moved softer, talked slower, made room, not for applause, for others, because power isn't how high you go. It's how gently you reach down. And Justin? He kept dancing, not for the cameras, not for the brand, for them, for the ones still in driveways with paper footballs and shoelaces unlaced. To show it's not a stretch, it's a step. And they can take it too. Loss doesn't always show up in the scoreboard. Sometimes, it limps in quietly, wrapped inside a hamstring, a missed moment, a Sunday spent in sweatpants instead of shoulder pads. Justin felt it first as a tug. Barely a whisper. Then louder. Then the silence no athlete wants, weeks, not days. Sidelines, not snap counts. He stood suited but untouched. Helmet cradled, watching plays unfold without him in them. Not jealous. Just aching. Not just in muscle, but in momentum. The world asked daily, "When's he back? Is he okay?" But those questions never pierce as deep as the ones he asked himself. Am I still me if I'm not moving? Can a rhythm restart after it's been paused? He rehabbed, each stretch slow, each movement a mirror to his own patience. No crowds, no cheers, just tension bands and trainers and the quiet discipline of showing up when the lights don't care. When teammates took the field, he clapped. Encouraged, but it itched. The not being able to help in the way he knew best. Halftime talks still welcomed him. The locker room still loved him. But a competitor's heart doesn't rest kindly. He learned to listen not for the roar, but for the subtle signs. When mobility returns, when pain steps back. The soft return of trust in your own legs. And in that waiting, he found something sharper than speed. Perspective. He saw the game's gears turning from the edge. Saw schemes breathe. Saw timing as tempo, not pace. Leadership as stillness, not volume. When young wideouts struggled, he offered a word. A nudge. A story from when he, too, wasn't on the field, but held the fire anyway. He remembered the boy on the cracked driveway. No cameras. No cleats. Only dream. This was no curse. It was communion. Time to return, not just restored, but refined. Because the body recovers, but the mind? It rewrites, retrains, reframes. Every route ahead would now carry a deeper thread, of endurance, of understanding, of what it means to matter even when you're not seen. Because true players don't vanish when the games go on without them. They root, they rise, they return, and when he stepped back on that field again, there wasn't a roar. Just the quiet understanding, he hadn't left. He'd just been listening. The murals don't cheer, they just exist, quiet monuments to movements that once felt like whispers. In one, he's stretching mid-air, ball-cupped like a promise kept. In another, grinning mid-gritty, knees bent where joy meets legacy. St. Rose still hums the same way. Rain cares nothing for records. It taps on rooftops, snakes down driveways, and still finds boys with dreams blooming barefoot in the dusk. Justin never built monuments. He built moments, and in doing so, became something worth remembering without needing to be loud. He never wore gold like armor. Wore it like warmth, a nod to every morning run when no one clapped but his chest still pounded forward. You won't always find him speaking first, but watch his feet, they still talk, each cut, a conversation. Each catch, a continuation of the story he started in silence. He didn't chase flash. He sharpened quiet until it became a blade the league couldn't dull. They call it greatness. He calls it work. They call it highlight. He calls it home. And yet, he's not done. Because stories like his, they don't close. They echo. They ripple. They remind that sometimes the loudest impact is made in softness. That shouting isn't the only way to be heard. That grace, when worn consistently, becomes legacy. He was once the boy in the corner of the frame, half a smile, full of hope. Now, the whole frame bends to fit his shape. But he doesn't use that space to puff himself. He fills it with others. With chances. With belief. He doesn't stomp anymore. He steps. Still. Sure. Faithful. Not to a rival, but to purpose. And when the crowds fade, when the cleats are dusted and shelves lined, his story will remain not for what he did, but for how he made others feel when he did it. Not roaring, resonating, because in a world desperate to be louder, he whispered. And we listened, and we remembered, not because of volume, but because truth, when moved through kindness, carries further than noise ever could. He never needed the world to shout his name. He just needed it to pause. To feel. And now, it does.